Hello and welcome everyone. We are going to get started. Welcome to iEARN-USA's Wednesdays with the World webinar series, the final one. And we're really excited to be here today for an iEARN International Book Club mini lesson. If we could go to the next slide. Before we jump in, we wanted to share a few tips to participate in this webinar and make your experience as smooth as possible. As some of you may already be doing, please continue to use the chat box to engage with others. And please make sure to set your messages to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see your questions and comments. So you'll see the little blue row there. You can just click on it and you'll see that option. If you have a question, you can click on the Q&A to type it in, or you can just type it in the chat box. And as we go along, we'll be sure to address it. If we don't get to it, we'll definitely be sure to do so by the end of the webinar. If your connection is slow, you can close all unnecessary programs and restart your computer, or connect directly to your router if that's possible. So my name is Nicole Weitzner, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Jennifer Russell and Mary Brownell. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the iEARN-USA education team for their support. Thanks to Connie and Roshana for all they're doing behind the scenes. We're really excited to have you all join us for the next hour. And we'd like to get a sense of who's joining us today. So please introduce yourselves in the chat box if you haven't already, and share where you're joining from, as well as your professional role. I see we have people from various places. Let me take a look here. I see we have someone from Qatar, from Texas. I'm joining from New York City. I know Mary is in Pennsylvania. So various places all around the world. Moldova, welcome everyone. It's just wonderful to be together for this hour from so many different parts of the world. Okay, so Mary Brownell will be showing us how to adapt lessons from the Finding Solutions to Hunger project to meet the needs of students at this time. And following that, Jennifer will share some tips for online teaching and learning. At the end, we'll have some time for your questions and closing announcements. So I'd love to introduce Mary now. She has quite an impressive bio. She's an English and humanities teacher, reading specialist and global education teacher, having taught middle and high school at Abington Friends School and Springside Chestnut Hill Academy in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the US. She holds master's degrees in English, secondary education, and reading comprehension. And she was a bridge program course facilitator for iEARN for the Finding Solutions to Hunger and iEARN-USA, Finding Solutions to Hunger project. And for iEARN-USA, she's a global ambassador. She works closely with the organization KIDS, which stands for Kids Can Make a Difference, as a board member and a curriculum consultant. And she's currently involved in both academic study and professional writing. She's received National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowships for the study of 20th century American women writers, the Italian Renaissance, and Francesco Petrarch, John Milton, and William Shakespeare. She's received literary honors from the Leeway Foundation, the Pennsylvania Council of the Arts, the Yeats Society of New York, the Robert Frost Foundation, the National Writers Union, and Abroad Writers, as well as others. She lives in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania in the US. And with that, I'd like to welcome Mary and hand it over to her to begin our mini lesson. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you, Nicole. That was a lovely introduction, a little embarrassing, but maybe all of you can tell that all my life I've wanted to be a writer, and so I still do write. But in addition to that, being a teacher I couldn't be more proud of that. I'd like to begin by thanking especially Connie for all her patience the last week with me as I was figuring out what to say and how to pull this together in the ways that I really wanted to do, and she was very patient. The other people that I want to thank are all of the teachers who have been involved in this project over the years, because you have made the project continue. You have made it worth revising and changing so that we can study hunger not as a problem out there, but something very close and critical, especially right now. Um, the first slide, but before I begin, I am going to talk about several of the lessons that are available to teachers in the project and how you can adapt them, which is something I always, I struggled with it as a teacher, but I also found it positively challenging how to be able to do that so that I wasn't always working in isolation, but that I could figure out solutions to meeting the needs of my own school while collaborating with others. And that's what I hope to present to all of you today. For those of you who might not know, just here's a brief sentence of what the project is. The symbol on the side, Eliminate Hunger, was created by students from Qatar who are now student ambassadors for the project. They'd been involved with their teacher and Breen for several years, did not want to give up their involvement, and have stayed with the project, working in the forum, commenting to other teachers and students. Very proud to have that emblem be part of the standing in for the project. Next slide. The project too, for those teachers, if you might not know, is absolutely aligned with the second UN sustainability goal. So again, for teachers who might have a curriculum where you are teaching the goals, this is one that has direct relevance. Also, the UN has provided many lessons and activities beyond just those that are offered in the project form, just so you know that. But if you needed to perhaps justify having a unit on hunger for some reason in your curriculum, it's right there. Next. When I started working in the forum and in the project many years ago, and even when I add a new lesson, I ask myself these questions because I need to get them answered for myself before I can give something to other teachers. I didn't want students to simply think that studying hunger was an academic endeavor to be ended with maybe a test. So I would ask myself these, and what ended up always happening is that I wanted to end whatever unit on hunger I had, no matter what school I was in or the large or small group of kids or the amount of time I had. Could it end in some activity, something? And the students always wanted that, wanted to end in taking action. So these questions are just ones that I ask myself that I offer to all of you. And if any of them have any special, well, they'll be in, you'll be able to read them yourself when you, oh, thanks for going back to them. I wondered if any of you listening found one that spoke to you more than others. I particularly liked number 2, the second bulleted point, what activities would guide me in helping students define hunger in both of those ways, factual and narrative. And that's because I'm an English teacher and a history teacher, and I had to, I was always thinking about ideas within those two subject areas, but also in how to help students know that difference. To understand something factual doesn't always lead to the kind of action that, or can always lead to a kind of action that that they may not know how to take. The next. I wanted to start with a primary activity that you'll see can be absolutely adapted. I use the same idea in middle school. But if we ask primary, and I'm talking kindergarten, first, second graders, these questions in a discussion, basic questions, you'll get very basic answers, right? Okay. Next question, next slide. But where can you go from there with that if you have a discussion? Where I went was to do a seed comparison. I brought bowls of rice, raw rice, peas, beans, barley to school. And we talked about exactly those questions. Where did these seeds come from? How do people cook them? I did not have children sketch them as the option in number 2, but other teachers who participated in the program have done all 4 of these activities just with those bowls of seeds. In the photo, those are from Sierra Leone. If you go to the next slide, just for a moment, we can always come back, you'll see them even closer. And I found that no matter how many times I did this lesson or other teachers did, it was a great beginning for kids to have a sense of where grains grow. Some of them were totally unfamiliar. Some of them were very familiar. Go back to the previous slide, Jen, for a second. Thank you. When I would cover them with a cloth, as in number 4, that was a pivotal point in the lesson. If you take them away and your livelihood depended on them. And the younger students had many questions about what people did when they didn't have their seeds. And the reason I included this lesson, there are many, many primary lessons out there, is because it always led to questions of what do we have here in our own school or community or state or country, and what do people in other places do if the grains are gone. So it was it always seemed to lead to a good place that I could attach to, and other teachers have given feedback on that same point. All right, next slide. And the next one after that. Often now I'm sorry, back one. Previous slide, there we go. Thank you so much. The one that next, I'm sorry. The one after this one. Next one, there we go, perfect. This one, now if you have older students, older primary, sometimes I know many teachers ask their children to draw what they ate that day and maybe what they had to drink. If you have to do classes where you need to teach word recognition and vocabulary, make a list of the words. I'm trying to look at every lesson in a way that it could be embedded in a curriculum, because we don't always have time in our schools for global education the ways that we would want. At least I never did. I had to continually justify lessons until it got to be a much more common practice among the faculty and the different divisions of the schools in which I was teaching. But to take the seed activity and to maybe go to this point where you write down or draw what you've eaten, it takes that personal step again out into the shared world. Next slide, Jen. These were just examples of student writing. They would be very difficult for you to read, but the reason I included them is because these are students, they're upper elementary, lower middle, and they're practicing their English language skills, but they're talking about who they are and what their favorite food is and where they live. And I loved reading them. I loved what they shared, and I appreciated the fact that this teacher was embedding the study of what could be an understanding of hunger into lessons that had to be taught in English. The next slide, please. And here it is again. I also loved when the children all said what their name was and whether or not they were a boy or a girl and the name of their school. Just identity. And it seemed very important. Now, this is the next slide. Okay. Now this one is so filled with text. I know that. But the reason I wanted to include it is, imagine you are, well, not imagine, this was a teacher in Japan working with a teacher in Pakistan. And the teacher in Japan's students are postgraduate in a class studying, actually it's called Future Teachers. And what she and the teacher in Pakistan figured out was a lesson where the students in Japan would read to the students in Pakistan from a particular book called One Hen, and then discuss that book together. I just thought this was an amazing example. It took them a long time to figure out how to make this happen so that they could take the idea of a Skype session and sharing cultures, but a little bit, but also the focus on hunger once again. The whole lesson is available online, and if anyone wants it, but the preparation for this, for all of these children, was amazing to me, and again adapted the idea of reading a book out loud. If you go to the next slide, you'll see oh, let's see, can we go to the, can go next slide, please? We'll come back to this. Oh, we must have missed the cover of the book. Okay, go back. Maybe I don't, right there. Could you go back one more, Jen? Okay, back one more before this one. Back, okay. All right, maybe it's further ahead somewhere, but there's picture of the book that the students in Japan read. You can, next slide, Jen. It's got a beautiful head on the cover, but the sharing of activity, and once again, these two teachers took a lesson and unpacked it in ways that I never would have thought of. And also, the children got a chance to have a tiny geography lesson in that. Here's Japan on the map, world map. Here's Pakistan on the world map. They learned to say hello and thank you, but also to focus on the book. All right, next slide. Oh, there it is, yay! I just want you to see, those are some of the things I just mentioned that they could share, again, to make the hunger lesson part of whatever was happening in their daily curriculums as well. The older students in Japan had a chance to practice what it would be to be a teacher, drawing up lesson plans and carrying them out. And the students in Pakistan had a chance to cross culture lines in a big way. Next slide. And this, oops, the one before that. Nope.
Hi, Mary. Which one were you looking to pick up? I'll find the right slide for you.
There was another one after the another hand slide. It said adapted lesson.
Okay. There you go. Okay, we'll skip ahead to that. Yep.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you. Yep. here it is, again, just for you to see exactly what the lesson was. So they read One Hen together. All right, next slide. So that was high school and primary taking that one lesson. And now let's move to middle and upper. You have to take a different approach. I would started with these questions and gave students huge big pieces of paper, broke them into small groups to just get their sense of who's hungry and how widespread do they think hunger is. And from that led us into a study of, not a study, becoming aware of the UN goals, and then especially point number 4, to brainstorm ways to put ideas into some action. But as a topic lesson, and in the project forum, there are many different little ways you could begin to do this. Also, when I was collaborating with other teachers, sometimes the language skills for all of us were very developmental, and I'm keenly aware of that as a reading teacher and an English teacher. And I didn't always want to make the fluency in English be so important, so that I would make sub lessons so that it didn't have to be. Asking these questions and then seeing what actions could be taken, that sometimes had to be more of the collaborative effort than anything else. The next slide, please. In this, these are children in Sierra Leone, and they asked their teacher, Ibrahim, had their children brainstorming on just the 2 ideas that were in the previous slide. What do we know about hunger and how widespread is it? These children did little, I'll call them mini reports. That's their poster. I had them on tiny little movies where they introduced each other and their work. But it was, they were so proud and pleased to have made that banner in the background and to be able to discuss hunger a little bit, especially after coming off of tremendous flooding in their area of Freetown and having school off to a late start. It was closed because of the flooding, and they are very active in the project, as you'll see shortly. But that's their answer, not a great deal of English writing, but being able to speak about it and share their poster. Okay, next slide. They took their ideas. The teacher and I had talked about gardening, and they wanted to see if they couldn't grow their own food. So they began to clear a small space, and the bottles you see became a wall around the area that they had cleared. They filled the empty water bottles, recycled them, filled them with sand, which is something I had done with my students, and we filled the bottles with plastic bags, recycled bags. So again, a small unit on what does it mean to be hungry and what does it mean to do something about it, took actions that I never would have thought possible. My own students, I loved these pictures because reminded me so much that across the world, here in Philadelphia, we were doing the same thing. And now in Sierra Leone, years later, there they are, combining recycling, trying to plant, gathering seeds, learning about seeds, to do something in their own community that they need. Next slide. There they are at the beginning, just cleaning again. That is a photo of tomato plants in the middle. And in the lower left, you can see them planting tomato plants with the bottles forming a barrier. So they took action. And again, there's an adapted project activity that didn't lead to a great deal of final product, poster making or presentation. It went in this direction, all of which is good. Next slide. And these children were also planting. They are Pakistan also, and the seeds are there. There's not, to see little things growing, not much, but I chose these pictures because I just thought how proud and pleased they looked, putting those pots up on that outdoor shelf. And they're something very different than what's happening in Sierra Leone, but nonetheless, it's that taking action and that feeling that you can do something about hunger, that you can learn to do it and grow. I think that when kids plant seeds, that they make a memory that's important. Next slide. These are just photos again of plastic bottles being made into the wall. This, you can see the girls are actually using mortar to build it up a couple of bottles high in the hope that it would stay strong. But again, next slide. Now here's responses. Again, didn't go into planting, but I included these because they were long and they were so thoughtful. I don't need to read any of them to you. I didn't plan on doing that. But what I wanted to say was that they were photographed by their teacher, who had only a phone, and then he would send them to me and I would post them to the forum, so that they didn't have a great access to technology, but still we were able to get their work posted so that students in other countries could read what they had read. So it was a partnership being created on the go, so to speak. But once again, we have to work with the resources we have and not study hunger as if it's something far away. When they would send these and I would receive them, these were some of the first public, the first public displays of their writing that they've ever experienced. So it was very exciting. Next slide. I included this because the one on the left always makes me smile. After all that work, those are my students. We filled 500 bottles to make our garden walls. We planted, I don't know how many seeds, huge number, and that was it. We got one basket of tomatoes in one little basket of peppers. The teacher and students on the right are from Uganda, and Grace is the teacher's name, and they have planted an entire field and are harvesting a great deal. It's a very exciting adventure, and they too were in the project, learning about hunger in other places, but also what they could do in their own area. So I just wanted to include those because the picture on the left makes me smile. Next, and the one on the right makes me happy. This is a video. It's a minute long that many teachers have shown just to start a project, a secondary. I wouldn't show this to younger students, but when I was teaching high school and other high school teachers on a secondary level, we would start with this. just to set this tone. So if you would play it, Jennifer, that would be great. Great. Good. Thank you, Jennifer. There are probably 100,000 videos that are easily accessible on YouTube to show students. I specifically stay away from videos that show many photographs of desperately hungry people. I think that the one that we had, 1 million, does a good job of presenting the tremendous numbers of hungry people there are without photographs, which add kind of an emotional angle to study. And as a teacher, I just am very careful about that. And even after all these years, I'm still trying to figure out why. So I encourage, if any of you have ideas about that, to please chat about that, because it would help me to learn too. But I do stay away from that with children and try not to. That's why I thought this video was one that was worth sharing. And I find that other teachers felt that way as well for the older students. And it could lead to, next slide. Usually when I've shown that, or kids want to get active right away, but if you have only 2 weeks, I just wanted to give you a sense that it could be done. If you had 2 weeks and maybe you had for a 45-minute period each day, so you had 10 periods, you could do something that would end in a tremendous understanding of hunger, and maybe even actions that could be taken. And what could you do? Next slide. This is something that's often done as part of a 2-week study or on its own. This is so highly adaptable for middle and secondary students that you sponsor a hunger banquet, which is, and there are extensive directions provided in the project forum and all over the web, but it is a very basic idea that you may, in just a class, you could have 15 students, 20 students, 100 students. A certain number of them have a red ticket, a certain number have a blue ticket, another number have a white ticket, and they seated at different tables or on the floor, and they have different, are given perhaps a cracker and a glass of water, or a slice of an apple and a piece of cheese. But the difference is it's then discussed by percentages about what is happening in the world in terms of what people actually eat. The next slide, Jen. I included this because this secondary school in Ireland did a huge school-wide hunger banquet, and just watching the 7-minute video was very encouraging to me. And just the students that became involved from one grade to another afterwards, and their understanding in a 45-minute period, the entire upper school understood more about hunger in our world and what they could do, what they take action than before. So it was worth including. And it was just something I stumbled into in Ireland. I never would have thought that that existed there. I'm still learning too. Next slide. This is a very simple hunger banquet. This picture on the left, there's water and crackers, very little. But when that discussion and lesson was over, the picture on the right, these students were making meals that would be delivered through an organization called Aid for Friends that delivers meals to people that are shut in the Philadelphia area, hundreds of meals every day. So on this is something that we do 3 times a year. We had a hunger banquet with different age students, secondary, and then took action right away. The next slide. These were from many different countries, teachers from the project forum, all kinds of presentations and displays and research that I am so impressed with, because for everything you see on these pages, everything that these children learned, they took so many different directions to see what they could do to aid lessen hunger, from fundraising to Kiva loans for small entrepreneurs in all over the world, to basic understanding in their own communities. Some of these are from not celebrations, but World Hunger Day at their schools, or Health Week at their schools, so that their work was shared, so that it would not just increase awareness, but again, lead to activity. I loved the differences among them all, the photos and the pictures and the writing, some handwritten and some, beautifully typed. Next. I wanted to include this because these were girls from Qatar that I had mentioned earlier who did not want to stop their involvement when their work in the project ended. They, again, have continued to be responsive in the project forum, but they too turned to gardening. Maybe we all are going to be gardeners once again. Maybe when the pandemic's over, may it be over, that's what we'll turn to. But here they are in their part of the world. And I didn't quite know where to put this slide, because they're certainly not primary and they're certainly not middle. They're just about finishing secondary, but there they are. Next slide. Also, I wanted to include this because, again, one lesson, that seed lesson, also, this was a paper written by the student ambassadors, an academic paper. So not only did they plant, they wrote. As a I don't even know if it was a final project requirement. But again, I wanted all of you to see the stretch of meaning that any one lesson from the project can give. Planting and writing, um, of finding out what kind of a um, student you are in terms of how you understand hunger. It's not just one lesson and one way of doing it. And some teachers worked independently. These girls worked very independently. Some teachers collaborate and exchange on the forum all the time. But there's has to be flexibility in that given the resources that we all have. And it works. It can work. Next slide. I just chose this because I love UNICEF. We all know about UNICEF. And UNICEF has, again, what students are doing across Ireland to start a global movement just gives me great hope that that can be happening in other countries as well. They're doing tremendous things, and there's a toolkit available through UNICEF that I wanted to make all of you aware of, possible. Next slide. There we all are, all over the world. And next slide. Thank you to Kids Can Make a Difference, which is a great resource also for you. Many activities. We post iEARN forum responses to the kids website, and that's why I wanted you to see this site too, and you can access it anytime. It's a resource. And the last slide. I think it's the last slide. I keep a copy of this near me all of the time because it just reminds me of why I'm involved in the project. Hunger is a cold fire. Let us sit down soon to eat with all those who haven't eaten. Let us spread great tablecloths, put salt in the lakes of the world, set up planetary bakeries, tables with strawberries and snow, and a plate like the moon itself from which we can all eat. For now, I ask no more than the justice of eating. So, thank you all for listening. I hope you came away with some ideas for projects. And email me if I can be of any help.
Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing about the Finding Solutions to Hunger project and sort of highlighting how students of different ages from elementary, middle to secondary school can tackle the issue of hunger and explore it in their classroom. I just was noticing in the chat box that there are many participants of the Finding Solutions to Hunger project here. I recognize Sadie from Senegal, Grace from Uganda. I saw also one of your student ambassadors, Zoya, from Qatar. And so I think that's a testament to how important of a topic and a project this is for people in our network, in the community, in the world, and that they're here today. So if you're a participant here in the webinar, I hope you please will share some of your experience in the chat, maybe an activity that you did that Mary mentioned that was meaningful for you or changed your perception of hunger in your community or globally. Please do feel free to share. Also, please feel free to ask questions for Mary in the chat box. I'm going to do a quick tip session and then we'll wrap up with questions. So please do, as you are reflecting on what Mary has shared about finding solutions to hunger, think of your questions and write them in chat, and we will circle back to them as a conclusion to our webinar. Okay, so for now, I'm going to take us back to our slides for our tips session that will be presenting. So as part of our Wednesdays with the World series, we've been looking at different tips for online teaching and learning as we're all adjusting to being at home and isolated during the COVID crisis. So in the series last week, we were looking at project-based learning and looked at how you develop a final product as part of your project. Today, we're going to be reflecting a little bit more on another component of project-based learning, which is engaging the community and making the work that you do in your projects public and engaging others. I think this is especially important right now as we're all very much a bit more isolated at home, and students are probably feeling this as well. Their interactions are a bit more limited, and all of us, as we're adjusting to teaching and learning online, everything is a bit more isolated. So we're going to draw some experiences from iEARN projects and look at how we can really engage ourselves and our students with others in the community around them while we're all moving to online and remote learning formats. So I'm going to highlight a couple phases of project-based learning that you may be doing with your students and ways to think about how you might engage with other people outside of your classroom to enrich the learning experience and perhaps introduce a little bit more social contact for your students. So the first sort of phase, I think a lot of people, when they start a project, they're engaging their students in research. And so Mary was sharing this in Finding Solutions to Hunger, different phases, asking questions and engaging students and looking at an issue. As your students are starting a project or picking up a new topic and engaging in research, think about how you might be able to pull in people in the community. You might be able to invite experts in to present some of their experience, to review perhaps some records or data that they might have, or even have your students interview that person as they learn about the topic. Imagine you're inviting someone who maybe runs a local food pantry to be interviewed by your students and asking about what are the challenges now in your community around hunger and how are you solving them. So that's a great way to sort of pull people in and engage your students with others at the research phase. Of course, also in iEARN, you can connect with other students in other classes around the world and ask them for their experiences. And so I think, as Mary showed with that seed activity, asking the students to take pictures and talk about and show seeds. This is the way that students are gathering research, not only from their community and perspective, but they can connect it with others around the world. All right. At some point in your project, you're probably, your students are working in teams and working independently perhaps, but they're starting to put their learning together and working on project components. The feedback and guidance phase is another really great way to engage outside of just your classroom and get students connecting with others, whether that's other peers that they're learning with or experts in the community. So you can have experts come in, business leaders, perhaps it's a farmer, for example, who is looking at students' plans for a garden, let's say, and giving them feedback on their work so that they can reflect and refine and create something that's tied to a real world issue. You can also have students create and critique one another's work. If you're not, and it's a little bit difficult moving to do that in an online format. You're perhaps used to doing this in class where they can talk with one another. But if you go back in some of our tip series, we looked at different tools that you could use. Perhaps you can use forums for students posting their work, critiquing and giving each other feedback. You could also look at doing some video conference sessions and doing group breakouts. But having students give feedback on their work as they're going, or bringing in experts is a great way to connect learning beyond just the individual student. And finally, I think a big phase of project-based learning is sort of celebrating the work, producing your public product, exhibiting and displaying what you're learning. So as you're moving to that phase where students have reflected on feedback, refined their projects, and they're ready to celebrate, that's a really great time to think about how you're engaging outside of the classroom as well. You can have students present their projects virtually using a video conference tool like Zoom. we're in fact going to share about our virtual project exhibition, where we have teachers and students do just that, present their work virtually for an audience. You can look at creative ways of doing photo or art exhibitions and virtually sharing that with others to go view and comment. Or you can think about doing some sort of live video conference demonstration or workshop. Perhaps your students are able to plan and teach other students, or to do a demonstration for a science experiment on a video conference. So all fun ways to think about how, as students are producing their work, they're not just sharing it with the teacher, but they're using that as an opportunity to connect students with one another, and perhaps also with others outside of the community. Okay, I wanted to note here, we have a great resource on our iEARN Teacher's Guide on engaging the community that gives different ideas for how you can locally and globally engage different actors at different phases. I really encourage you to check it out if you're looking for ideas to really stimulate your students and get them thinking of having more social interactions with one another during this time. So if you go to our guide.iEARN.org and check out Module 7, we've got the link in the chat box as well. There's a wealth of resources there and ideas for you. And so as you're thinking about authentic audiences, who your students can interact with besides their teacher, or besides perhaps their other students in the class, here's sort of a short list of ideas to think about. I'd be curious in the chat. My question to you is, imagine you're doing the Finding Solutions to Hunger project, and you're trying to bring in community members, experts, or somebody else into your project. Who might you ask to join, either for research or to celebrate students' work, to present their work? Any ideas? I think I mentioned a few already. I'm going to pop open the chat box so I can look. Okay. I think I gave one example before where I said you might consider, if there is a local food pantry or some nonprofit organization working with hunger, you could reach out to them and ask them to either join the project, to have your students interview them, or perhaps at the end for students presenting and sharing their work. I like what Connie wrote in the chat box. This is something I was thinking about as well, is especially with all those seed images, local farmers. You could ask a local farmer to perhaps join your class and share for a couple of minutes, or listen to students talk about planting and working on their gardens. So that's a great idea. So again, here's a short list of different places to think about who you can connect with. You can connect with local authors, artists. If you have a university close to you, you can connect with professors or researchers. And I'll say, one of the things, as we're all adjusting to doing a lot more online, it makes a little bit of availability for people to be able to join you and your classes. I think it's sometimes difficult to get people to do something in person and travel to a school to show up. But now that we're all online, or many of us are online, think about inviting someone from a local business or from the government office to share for 10 minutes. I know a lot of local business owners or officials would really appreciate the opportunity to connect with young learners as well. Again, a couple ideas of ways that you can help connect and stay engaged during project-based learning, but especially as we're transitioning to online learning. I love to see here some ideas also about press and also officials. They love to share the ideas of youth. Great. Okay. I'm going to move us forward to our question phase. And I'm going to take a moment and scan through our chat box and see if there's any questions that have come through or any great comments. But before I do so, I just want to highlight for everyone joining us today that we are having a virtual project exhibition next Thursday. And so this is how we're helping to support classes connect with the global community and celebrate their work. So we'll have sessions at 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And the registration is going to be shared in the chat box down below, so be sure to check that out. And just a thanks, we really appreciate you for joining us for our last webinar for Wednesdays with the World for now. And we're going to be sharing the recording to this webinar in the next few days. The Wednesdays with the World page on our website has the links to the entire series. You can go back and revisit some other iEARN projects and their mini listens, and also some of the tip sessions. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. Our email and websites are listed here on this slide. We're here to support you in your remote learning efforts, answer any questions you may have, and helping you join us in iEARN and the projects and supporting your learning